This is our last MOOC webinar on communication. On social media, I was promising a fireworks. As usual, we're going to record this and then be putting it on YouTube so that that people can use and access it. On the recording, you usually see the speaker only and the presentation. So if you don't want to appear in the video, then you can pose your questions in the chat and don't have to, articulate them, or you just switch off your video or whatever, you feel like. But it's going to focus on those speaking, so don't worry about that if you don't want to appear in the video. We have as guests today, first Antonella Broglia, who's been working for Ashoka. She's based in Spain for 14 years. I won't say anything else. She'll do the rest. And then we have also Patton, who's based in London, who's Irish, I just learned, and who's the managing editor of Pioneers Post, the social enterprise magazine. We're covering a lot of stuff on social enterprise, impact investing and social innovation internationally. And she's going to focus on how social entrepreneurs, social ventures get their stories into the media. So we have one talk focusing on pitching, personal communication, and the second one on media communication. We usually have people popping by later on, so it usually takes like 5 to 10 minutes for people to settle in. But we'll just keep admitting those as we go. As usual, if and when you have questions, just post them in the chat, so we can always get back to those. We'll keep an eye on those. We'll let our two speakers present for 15 minutes each, and then we can hopefully have a good discussion, taking the questions that we're gathering beforehand on. Maybe I should also introduce myself, which I haven't done yet. So I'm Gorgi. I work for the Center for Social Investment at Heidelberg University. We're part of the Finance for Social Change project and developing MOOC. And together with me and the actual host of this meeting is Alex Kesselring from Ashoka, Austria and Central and Eastern Europe, and he's based in Vienna. So we will later on be chairing and trying to moderate the discussion together. But just please feel free to, as I was saying, gather your questions, comments, also express your feelings, whatever you want to do as we go. Okay, so I guess I'll just pass on the word to Antonella, who can already have a go, and then we'll just see how this all develops.
Public speaking is my job and my passion. I have been organizing 40 TEDx events in the last 8 years. I've also been an ambassador for the program TEDx, that, as you all know, belongs to the TED, the huge media organization. I've been an ambassador for Europe for another 8 years. I've been working in the theater since I was 17. I've also been in TV for 7 years, hosting a program on social entrepreneurs. Plus, I've curated speeches, many speeches. I've counted 400, and many of those have been for social entrepreneurs, young social entrepreneurs, established ones, to help them to tell their stories, inside and outside Ashoka and other organizations like Skoll Foundation. So what can I share with you about what I've learned? First of all, what is it that we call a good story? Not for a book, not for a movie, those are not my fields, but for a speech. Remember, we are talking about public speaking here. So you may answer that a good story is a story that makes you cry, a story that gives you emotion, a story that's something that you will never forget. And all these answers are fine, but they're not easy to work with, this idea, because these are subjective reactions. It's not easy to work with crying, to work with emotion, to work with remember. These are complex ideas that normally put us in problems when we want to use them proactively in public speaking. So my proposal today is to be very practical, very down to earth, very much, and see story as a tool. They are not an end. They are a tool for public speaking. So if stories are tools for a speech, the true question should be, when we can say that the speech is a good speech? When? What is it that we call a speech a good speech? And my answer would be when the speech reaches its purpose. And that's it, fundamental to understand story and storytelling, that every speech must have a purpose, and you are the one that need to establish the purpose, that transformation that we want to create in our audience. To convince a class of students to be volunteers in the environment is not at all the same that convince an investor to give you money. This is obvious, but we need to remember this when we write, when we prepare each of our speech. So first of all, we need to establish that purpose. And then we need to think about the content that we need to collect, that we need to build to reach that purpose. It's like to build a case in front of a jury. It's the same thing. So how should I use my story as a social entrepreneur to win that purpose? I don't believe very much in formulas. I don't believe in theories at all. You know, public speaking is a practice. You cannot understand from, intellect. You need to do this. It's about your body, it's about every part of you. But because we are here in this kind of video, let's do the best of it. So some tips, okay? Point number one, start anew, do not recycle. Social entrepreneurs never have time to work on things and never have time to work on speeches. And what they do normally is recycle presentation that they already gave. Bad, very bad. Speaking in public is a mean of power. Words can change the world, truly. There are not so many things that can, and words can. Every time you have an opportunity to speak in public, sit down and prepare specifically, because this is a new audience, this is a new opportunity, maybe this is a new purpose, and it's a new experience. The past doesn't serve. So spend time preparing. Start anew. 2, think about yourself and your story. Because it's our story, we never think about those. We think that we know already everything we need to know because it's our own story. But this is not true. We need to find some tranquility, sit down and interrogate ourselves anew every time about some basic, very basic questions. For example, how did I come in contact with the problem? So why that need or that suffering that we see in someone was so life-changing for us? Why we were in the position of not avoiding to do something to help? That's very important. What's the connection between me and that suffering, or that need, that imbalance, that injustice? That is very fundamental. And because it's us, we never ask this question truly. Again, and then more questions. How did I think about that solution for the first time, and why? Also very important, the path of obstacles and failures. Yes, that's fantastic. We think that we cry and that inspire people. No, it's our courage to overcome the obstacles that inspires people. Because, social entrepreneurs are not heroes. I know so many of them. They're people. They're really normal people that what they do is obsess with bringing a solution to the people. So there are many obstacles. There are many failures. And those stories are very interesting. How did you solve each problem that you find in your way? And then how did you discover it worked? How were you able to scale it? Because this is very interesting too. Which are the elements that make that a solution that works in a little area of a city can work in 3 countries? These are the huge learnings for us to discover there's something that you can do in your street. Like in these days during the lockdowns, you can bring it to a national population. And then what's the situation today? What did you achieve? And also what's in the future? That is also fundamental, which is the view for the future. And instead of using the word text, taka, 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 which all of us do, forget about the word. Word is a bad tool. Tools are fundamental in public speaking and in everything. The tool that you choose to use is fundamental to explain the results in any activity. So to respond to these fundamental questions about your story, use post-its. I know this is banal. Our life, design thinking, blah, 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 is all full of post-its. Guys, girls, this is not banal, because this will help you to give granularity to these ideas. These responses to the previous questions one by one, idea by idea, in a post-it. This will be very much helpful afterwards, because you can really strategize about the best use of each part of your story and your solution story to reach your purpose. You remember you have a purpose. So word is very static. We don't write because we'll not be read. We will be listened to. So we don't write. Forget about the word. Word is the worst for public speaking. Let's continue. More tips. Bring more stories on the table. You're not the only one living your story. There are other angles. The more angles you come in contact with, the most interesting the speech will be. So, second angle, and don't laugh. Ask your mother and your father. Because, you know, they know what you don't know. They remember when you started to act like an entrepreneur. Maybe you were 11. Many social entrepreneurs at Ashoka started very young, when they in their teens. And they don't even remember that they did. Because you know, memories stays in incredible places, but your father and your mother will remember, will tell you their part of the story of your social innovation. They will remember when you started to care about a problem, and if you discover that you started to care about a problem when you're very young, this is very interesting, even for an investor, because they will then discover that this is a life's obsession, and you will never stop about working on that, and they will give you money, and you stay on the problem. So when you started and how you started, this is pretty important. Also ask them, the people that were an example to you, how did you inspire yourself, the things that were life-changing for you, teachers that made a difference in your life, all these stories are important too. Each idea in a post-it and bring them to the table. And then look for a third story, the same story, but on the angle of that thing that one in the past, one day we call the beneficiaries. Now, I hate this word. The people we work for are not beneficiary. It's just, they are people that are change makers too, and they will take our solutions and make the most of it. So I hate this word, but I use it as a way of understanding that people that lived in the suffering that you're trying to resolve. Ask them questions, bring their story on the table. What is it to live with that suffering? What is it to live in that injustice? How has your solution changed their lives? What more they did expect? What it is that really made the difference from their point of view? And each response an idea, and each idea on the post-it. So now you have a desk full of post-it. 3 angles, yours, your parents, a beneficiary. And you can have more, many more. But the idea is, every story has many angles, and other angles are very important to make a very compelling story. So you're there with all these post-its, and then comes the magic, the moment that I love. When I am with my students, it's so fantastic, or clients, it's so fantastic, because it always performs the miracle, this granularity. Remember, granularity. We don't need paragraphs. We cannot work with paragraphs. We need ideas. So we start to blend. Remember our purpose. Convince students to be volunteers in environment. Convince, investors to give you money. Convince a government to change a law. Convince, transform. So how can I use all these ideas in these post-its to create a strategy, to create a flow? And that's fantastic. It's really like a lawyer. So you use what you need, what you don't need, you abandon, and you also add those ideas that I call the ideas, yes or yes. Ideas that you know you want to talk about. It doesn't matter why, because you know that needs to be there. So we add those two. And we try different flows. We try starting from the beginning, which is the classic. Or we try to start from the end, which is less classics. Or we try to start in a future where my daughter will have a daughter, and she will have a daughter, and that world will be completely transformed. Or from my grandfather, or from the war, or from this very moment, or from the virus. There are so many ways to make a speech compelling, and the raw material is always the same, but granularity will allow you to create, because a speech is an act of creation, guys. It's not a thing. It's not a recycling of a PowerPoint. So once you have a flow that you like, it doesn't need to be the final. It needs to be something that you feel there is a flow there, that every idea comes from the previous one. You know, when they ask me, how do you see that the speech flows? It's because every idea come out from the previous one, and the previous one from the previous one, and the previous one from the previous one. And I will be so compelled to listen to the end. So once I have that, I need to ask me another question, last question. This first idea, do I need an image? Maybe a video, maybe an infographics, maybe a picture of my childhood to illustrate this? Not recycling a PowerPoint, asking this every time anew. And for the second idea, what do I need? A picture, a video, nothing, statistics, just my words that are able to entice imagination, and ask this question for each of the post-its. So you will have a flow of images, and that's your base. And you take your second tool, tape recorder, voice recorder. You don't need anything else. These are your two tools, and then your heart, and then your mind, and then your memory, and then your community. This is all you need. Don't use Word. It doesn't work. So you start and tape, right? You're taping, you're reading in some way these images, and you're describing them, and this is your speech. You can check the time, you can listen and understand if everything is clear, you can make some changes, but at least that is the base. And you will do this many times to assimilate. We do not memorize. This is not about memorizing. Memorizing is for children, and it shouldn't be for them either. We assimilate, we don't memorize, right? And then there is the day of the performance. So, the most important thing to know about performance is that the only thing that matters is the audience. You're there for them. Those are 100% the focus of your attention, not yourself, not your hands, not your intonation, not the poses, the classical dramatic poses. All this stuff doesn't work anymore. This is oratory as we understood it in the past, artificial, tools to make an impression. No, the only impression is your story is good. You're the owner of the story. Speak to them in order to convince them. This is what matters really. And now, so forget about artificial things. And also we know now that audience will recognize artificial things. And it's terrible. It separates the audience from you. And now we are in Zoom. And this is the last thing that I want to say. Now we are doing a lot of video calls. And we will do more and more because you guys, it's inevitable. Okay, we learned to do Zooms because of the lockdown, but I'm sure that we will do more and more conferences in Zoom for many reasons, to save money or because we have learned something that before we didn't know how to do. So what happens when you have to tell your story in a video call? That's a challenge for many reasons. So point number one, your audience is your key, exactly as before. So where is your audience? We tend to believe that our audience is on the screen because we see some little miniatures with the faces of these people, but they are not at all. So we look at this at the screen, and what we do is isolate ourselves because our audience is not there. Where is our audience? Behind the camera. We need to remember that if you want to watch them in the eyes, we need to remember that they are behind the camera, like the door, they ring it at the door, and you open the little, hole that you have in the door. You see, I don't know how to say this in English, and you can see who has ring the bell. That's your audience. Never lose them. If eye contact is important in physical experience, is even more important online. You need to watch them. Do not isolate yourself. It's your story. Do not isolate yourself easily, comfortably behind your screen. You need to trespass the screen, so do not forget that they are there. And also, finally, your image, your screen. Remember, everybody will see everything in your background. I see your background, you guys. I see pictures behind you, and I think, what is there in the pictures? Vacations, boyfriends, children's? Be careful to what you put in your background because everything is a distraction in Zoom. Everything is a distraction. So we need to make sure that we are in the center because the mind needs symmetry. If the speaker is not at the center, the mind will try to put the body in the center, and that will be distraction. Everything in Zoom is a distraction. Zoom is a attention consuming mechanism. We need, because the other one is trying to see body language or other significant gestures, and he's not able to do this. In real life, it happens, but here it's very difficult. So it's draining the attention. We need to focus on attention, minimize distraction. The background needs to be as clean as possible, with nothing competing with us, trying to be in the middle, look at the camera, and remember the 3-finger rule. So try to protagonize the screen, and also try not to be cut by the screen, because the mind needs to complete. We are designed to solve, and if something is missing, see, part of the air is missing, the mind will try to reconstruct what's missing. So remember, this is a new discipline. Zoom storytelling is a new discipline. Think about the media, that medium, take into account the limitations. 6 things to summarize, okay? 1, a good speech reaches its purpose. 2, stories are tools, not ends in themselves. 3, start afresh every time. 4, bring more angles at the table. Your story, your parents' story, the people you want to help story, and many other stories that you can bring, different angles, and reach the speech in an extraordinary way. 5, post it, not text. And 6, prepare, prepare, prepare. Any questions?
This was fabulous. So I only have one question. How long does it take to get to this level? So this is really wonderful, I think, Antonella.
Well, it's not a matter of time. It's a matter of, commitment.
Mm-hmm.
There is a moment after some experience that you have in front of an audience that you realize, and many social entrepreneurs live this, that you realize that you can really make a difference with your words. Is when the audience come at the end to talk to you, and you feel that they have been changed in a way or another, and then you understand the power, and then you understand you need to prepare. Also, sometimes you have bad experiences where you get a blank, experience when you understand that everybody's looking at their cell phones because you're not able to compete and win on their attention. So you go home and you understand that you need to take this much more seriously, because it is. If each word cannot change the world, what can? Think about that. No, what can? So even a very good strategy, a good social strategy, if it is not well explained, what do we do with this? And this is a great problem with social entrepreneurs. They are normally not very good in make their ideas clear, because they are obsessed with what they do, and they think that everything that is clear to them is also clear to everybody. No, it isn't. So it's not a matter of time. It's a matter of revelation, when you really understand that you can make a difference. And also, yeah, it's a matter of time. Nobody has time to prepare. So to also realize that you need to make time.
Great. Thanks, Antonella. Let's maybe open the room for discussion later on, and pass the floor on to Anna, and so we can then have a discussion, so to say, on both levels. So thanks very much for this strong input. So Anna, I'll pass the floor to you.
Great. Hi, everyone. Nice to be here. I feel like I need to take all of that advice on board and create the perfect Zoom experience for you all, but it might not be perfect. Anyway, I am the managing editor at Pioneers Post, which is a social enterprise magazine based in London, and covering stories all over the world. I'm going to talk to you specifically about how to reach the media with your social enterprise story, which is obviously kind of a specific audience, but I think a lot of the principles are quite relevant to communication in general. And there's certainly a few things that Antonella mentioned that I will probably echo a bit. I'm going to share my screen and see if that works.
Yeah, perfect.
Is that still working somehow? Cool, okay. So yeah, just to explain who we are if you don't know us, yeah, we're on pioneerspost.com. We do events, we do some awards and training, we do a weekly newsletter, and we're online, all online at the moment. We used to do print, but we're just online these days. We're actually a social enterprise ourselves, so that means all our profits go back into the business to support our mission, and our mission is to help support the kind of wide social enterprise, social investment movement around the world. And you can support us by subscribing if you like. It's £3 a month, and that gives you access to all our premium content. This is what I'm going to go through in the next 10-15 minutes. Just a quick sort of disclaimer, warning before I get too far into it. Then I want to talk about how do you get a journalist's attention, because it can be difficult. And then to talk about what you should be communicating. So the first thing I just want to say, and this definitely echoes what Antonella was saying, is just this point about, you know, why do you want media coverage? So what are your business goals? It's very tempting to say, you know, I want to create a video, or I want to have a brochure, or I want to do a podcast, or I want to be featured in a certain media. But think about who you're trying to reach, and whether media coverage actually is the best way to do that. And just related to that, you know, there may well be other channels that are much more accessible to you, or much easier to get to, maybe much more useful in terms of where your target audience are. So it might be that you're a really natural fit for Instagram, for example. There are some social enterprises that do really well on that, and just kind of building that word of mouth kind of referral, or sort of peer-to-peer referral. And then this is quite an important one, which people sometimes forget or are surprised by, and that's that we, as journalists, we want to tell your stories, but we're not there to do your PR. So you can send a press release of a great story to a journalist, and they may well pick it up and cover it in a way that you're not prepared, or that you weren't expecting. It may prompt them to ask questions that you weren't ready for. It could end up being a story that's actually kind of negative, or that takes some of your experience and puts it into a bigger story that is not the story that you were looking for. So just be conscious of that. If you're sort of fully confident that you're doing things in the right way and transparently, then you shouldn't really have something to worry about, but it's just something to kind of keep in mind, and not expect it automatically to be the kind of the story that you were expecting to see, because you don't have control over it ultimately. So yeah, how do you get a journalist's attention? Just want to remind you to kind of think beyond the obvious places. There's quite a lot of different angles. There's so much out there, and there's so many kind of channels out there these days. And it really depends, of course, on what your target audience is reading or listening to. And, you know, is that investors? Is it consumers? Is it a particular demographic in one country? You know, where are they getting their news? Where are they hanging out? Don't forget local news, because they will often really be interested in picking up a story of a local business. And often the bigger kind of national news outlets will actually be trawling through the local papers to look for stories that then get published in those bigger publications as well. Don't forget the trade press. So if you're a catering, a food social enterprise, or is there sort of a hospitality magazine or a catering magazine or website that people in your market are all reading? If you are going for kind of the big nationals, look for the kind of the right section of that media. So the BBC website used to do, I don't know if they still do it, but they had a thing called The Boss, which was just a regular feature of an interview with the leader of a business. And there was at least one UK social enterprise that was featured in that. I don't know if many of you have heard of solutions journalism or constructive journalism. So this is quite an interesting movement, which we at Pioneers Post are part of as well. But it's basically the idea that traditional journalism is very much this bad thing happened. We know that's the headline. This disaster happened. Things are going wrong. Whereas solutions journalism will say, these bad things are happening. Here are the people and organizations that are trying to solve it. And there's a number of publications that are now pursuing that in quite a detailed way. So you can see The Guardian there, for example, has a special section called Guardian Upside. They have a newsletter which they send out once a week, and it's often quite a mishmash of just stuff from all over the place. It's worth following the editor of that newsletter on Twitter, for example, replying to his call outs for examples, even emailing him. Yeah, there's a few other good examples in that list that you can have a look at as well. The other just basic thing is just to let people know that you're available for comment. So we at Pioneers Post, for example, we will often, if we're doing a feature on how social enterprises are supporting old people in post-COVID, we will go to a network body in the UK and say, you know, who's doing this and who do you recommend we speak to? So if you've already kind of established yourself within that group as a social enterprise that is quite active there, if you've got a nice case study on their website or on your own website, if you've got a spokesperson that's available, that's all really helpful. There's on Twitter, there's a hashtag you can look out for, which is journo request. So that's when journalists are looking for specific case studies, they'll often tweet that. I think on Twitter, there's a functionality where you can sort of set up an alert. So if your kind of search terms plus that hashtag come up, you could be notified of that. Yeah, I'll carry on through to keep moving. So these are just some general tips, quite a few on, I suppose, what sort of from our experience of people approaching us at Pioneers Post. First thing is really don't waste time pitching to publications that are just not in your area. We get so many emails from stuff that has literally nothing to do with social business, and you know, there's no point in us even looking at it because it's not for our readers. So do take a little bit of time to send it to the right place. But the second thing is, if you have sent it to sort of a generally relevant organization and you don't get a reply, don't assume that this is a rejection, that they're not interested. Often it's just that people are pretty busy. Sometimes the timing is just not quite right. You know, we might just have a bunch of other stuff to sort this week, or it just might not be the story that we feel is that relevant right now, but it may be in 2 months' time, we're writing a feature on that and we'll think, oh, who was that person that contacted me about that? And then we'll dig back into the email and find you again. So it is worth still getting in touch. The other thing is just to try to establish some personal connections with journalists. So if you sort of follow the coverage in your country and, you know, try to meet that person that is writing about your kind of work. I'm always happy if somebody wants to just have a quick phone call or meet for a coffee or something, without sort of like saying you must write about us, but just to tell me a bit more about their work. And, you know, now that I know this person, then it's just a lot easier. Then I will think of them when it comes to trying to find someone to contact. Find out what regular slots need to be filled in the publication. So, for example, we do a sort of weekly or fortnightly piece at the moment called Voices from the Front Line, which is sort of a first-person experience from social entrepreneurs. How are they dealing with life since COVID hit? If you, if you see something like that and you think we've got a great story that could fit right in there, you know, that's really helpful. If you email me and say, we're doing this, it would be a great story for that particular slot. That can be a really helpful way to kind of be more specific rather than just, this is us, here's what we're doing, and then you're kind of leaving me to try to figure out where I can fit you in. Just kind of practical things then. So give us a bit of advance notice. If you're doing something in a week, you know, try and tell us a week before rather than the night before or on the day. Journalists like to be the first ones to be reporting on it. So if you can find the journalist that you like and kind of build that relationship and offer them the sort of the first or at least the early kind of warning of what's coming up. If you do get in touch, make sure that you're going to be available for to answer questions. Make sure you provide a mobile phone number. Keep your website updated, because if we've never heard of you, we'll probably go straight to your website and check that you look kind of authentic, that you look credible. And then the last one is one that a colleague of mine always says when we do training, which is there's a temptation to think you need a PR person to sell your story. And often you as a social entrepreneur have a very strong story and a strong kind of personal story to tell. And you can tell that very effectively yourself, and it might not be as polished and perfect as a PR person would do it, but actually the authentic version is a lot more interesting. I'm going to skip a little bit through. Yes, photos, really useful if you've got good photos of your work, but also of people. So we really want to see people doing things. We want to see people in action. So not the pictures of people standing in a row looking at the camera. We want to see what your social enterprise looks like behind the scenes. Those are really, really helpful pictures to have. A lot of social enterprises do manage to get pro bono work from professional photographers. But even if you can't do that, just those authentic pictures that you take yourselves of behind the scenes will be better than no pictures at all. So this is an important one, and I think this again echoes what Antonella was saying. So when you are getting through to a journalist, what do you want to tell them? And I would always say the first thing we want to know is what's the problem you're actually tackling, and why is this an issue? So we get so many emails from people sort of launching straight into what they're doing, but I don't know if that's relevant or significant if I don't know what the scale of the problem is. And there's so many social enterprises tackling quite niche, specific things in all sorts of areas. And I'm not an expert on any of those things, and most journalists aren't. So you really have to take a kind of step back a bit and explain in quite a basic way. This is a problem. X number of people are affected. No one is fixing it because X, Y, Z. It's important now because whatever. And there's really no harm in just setting out that quite simple framing of the problem. And once we know that, then you can tell us sort of how you're solving it and what makes the way you're solving it particularly interesting. And that might be the impact that we've had so far, or it might be that you're doing it in a way that hasn't been tried before. But that's the kind of, that sort of original thing, that's the bit that the journalists will look for. So it's the first time it's been done like this, it's the only time something, what makes it different? That's what we're always looking for. And then really important to find a human story if you can. So coming back to often yourself as a founder, so that might be your childhood story, that might be kind of the reason that you started doing this, or it could be someone you've helped. But yeah, think about, we all love human stories. We don't get excited by stories about numbers. We get excited by stories about people. Just quick things that kind of always irritate me a bit. If the language is just not clear, if it's too complicated, if it's sort of trying to be too impressive, but I just still don't understand what you're doing, then you risk losing the person on the other end. So just try to be as simple as you can. Imagine you're presenting this to, say, an intelligent friend, but someone who works in a completely different field. So just say it out loud and write it a bit the way you would just say it. And don't exaggerate. It doesn't happen so often, but sometimes people tend to try to get attention, to kind of go overboard, and that's a bit risky, because then I start thinking, oh, well, I'm not sure I trust this person because they've just completely claimed something and actually it doesn't look like they live up to that at all. And then in terms of your credibility, if you're contacting someone out of the blue, it's really useful. Some of the things that I would check because these days everybody's claiming to be a social enterprise. So at least at Pioneers Post, we'll do a little bit of a quick sort of scan. Are they, well, what's their legal structure? Are they really structured as a social enterprise? But also, if you can mention we've had funding from this organization, this name, I've done a fellowship with this organization. We've been around for X number of years. We're a member of Social Enterprise Association in my country. All of these things, just additional information that you can have probably on your website, so that I can see as soon as I go there, I can kind of quite quickly check off those things. This is just a few last things. I asked a few other journalists for their views as well. And the first one made this point again, that a business story can be really dull. And of course it is exciting, and it's very exciting to you because you're right in it, but to someone else who's hearing hundreds of business stories, it can be dull unless you find that thing that's really going to grab their attention. So you need to sometimes push and figure out what that is. And it may well be right in front of you, and you just haven't really realized that that's the kind of interesting bit. The second one is also really important, I think, which is to think not just about your business. We may not write about your business, but if you've got an opinion, if you're working in a sector and you've got a strong opinion about something, we're always looking for quotes from people to sort of give comment on, I don't know, the latest government policy, or I don't know, the future of something, or the future of social enterprise, or all these kind of wider current affairs things. If you've got a strong opinion on that, you could maybe write a comment piece for us, or if you're on Twitter, we might be looking out for that, and we might then see you tweeting about it a lot, and then we might get in touch with you for more formal comments. And then the last one, I think, echoes what I said, which is just, think of it as building a relationship for the long term. So don't get too stressed if you don't kind of get that media coverage you're looking for straight away. You can build up a relationship over the long term, and it may well lead to something a bit later. I think that's it from me. I'll stop there.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Anna. What I found, maybe Antonella, you can put your camera back on, because I was struck by the fact that you both were talking about the audience a lot in different ways. And it appeared to me that often when you either compose a speech, or when you're writing something up, you think about the product maybe too much, how well the product looks, but not really how you get to your audience, how you communicate with them. So you were making the point, Antonella, sort of talking through the camera and reaching out to the people who are sitting behind it. And you were also saying, Anna, and that probably sort of transgresses from the editor as such, but the editor would be your first audience. So you need to sort of grab them, and then that would hopefully also account for the readers then, right? So what do you think in terms of this transition between maybe a speech, a pitch, a personal communication, and a written communication? So Antonella, you were saying, tell your story all over again. Whenever you prepare a speech, it needs to be a new one. But how would you see this transition? Because you were also saying, don't type something in Word, it's just going to kill everything. How do you translate a powerful personal performance into written communication? Or is this something completely different? Maybe we can start with Anna, and then Antonella, you can add in.
I don't work in written. Anna is the specialist.
I mean, I think the stuff that you've developed in a speech, a lot of that will be quite relevant to how you present yourself in a written form as well. That kind of sort of emotional storytelling, that I think that will be part of it for sure. I don't know, I'm not sure.
I tell you why I don't work in written. Not because I have anything with written, but what are the problems of working with written, drafts in public speaking? Very simple. One is you cannot change you know, the position of things. And I think that position of things make the structure, make the speech. You can do copy and paste, but the word is not an instrument thought for working a structure. So it's not very easy, right? You start in a way, and then it's very easily that beginning stay there forever. Second, what is it with writing in per se? We normally write what? Articles, theses, right? Notes for someone else to read. So what do? Long paragraphs and a lot of subordinates and parentheses. That's horrible for public speaking. Public speaking is short sentences. A TED, we know everything about this. In fact, there is a TED talk demonstrating for a guy, which is a research, that demonstrates that a speech with short sentences, subject, verb, and complement, full point, are those that work best. But while we write, we feel in the power of write long paragraphs, which are fantastic for an article, but they don't work in public speaking. Because the audience is not reading. The audience has only our words to follow us, which means that we need to be able to give little portions of ideas every time, not long paragraphs, because they will forget where we started from. That's very important. And the last but not least is because when you have a speech that you think works in word, the tendency is to use the word to learn it by memory. And that's the end of everything. Our concern will then become how to learn this by heart perfectly. So I will not forget a single word when I am in front of an audience. And that is not an activity that helps you. That's a tragedy, because then you will come up in front of an audience inside a bubble. Your mind will be closed inside the bubble. They will not be able to connect with the audience because it will be too busy in remembering. This is why word is so bad. When my students come here and they've started already to work on their account and they want to come here and show me that they have already done a lot of work and come with the words, I take the words and we destroy it because it's a very bad tool. You need to be able to granularize your ideas. You need to be able to mix your ideas in a way that works for you. You need to be able to keep an idea alive and not make him die on a paper. So nothing wrong with written communication. I do nothing in written, but because for public speaking it's very bad for these reasons.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Maybe Anna, we could build on that in terms of when it comes to written communication, what kind of story, what kind of arguments, what kind of maybe writing style also grips your attention, Anna, if someone sends you stuff. So what are the things, the triggering factors that people can pull in order to get through to you, so to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think writing style, I mean, I'm not expecting social entrepreneurs to be great writers. That, you know, that's not usually their job. If they are, that's brilliant. And then maybe they can write, you know, we have some who write columns for us, or we quite often have contributions from social entrepreneurs. But yeah, you don't need to be a great writer at all to get media coverage. You can send us a few lines in an email that could spark our interest, or a link to a video, or yeah, a link to your website, or whatever it is. But I suppose the stories, like in terms of the content of the story that sparks interest is, well, it's always, you know, that there's a reason it's called news, and that's because we're looking for something that is new. What is in there that we haven't seen before? What is something that you can already almost imagine the headline that you would put on that story, because it's just something quite intriguing. There's like an unexpected element in it, perhaps, or an unexpected character, and it is really like a story. You know, there's, you know, maybe it's someone who you wouldn't expect to be a social entrepreneur. Maybe, you know, maybe, I don't know, maybe someone very old or very young, or someone from a background who's not the typical kind of entrepreneur that you imagine. Or as you were saying, Antonella, earlier, the thing about overcoming obstacles, you know, often we're like, the ironic thing is in some ways we don't want always to hear stories of success. We also want to hear stories of, well, we want the stories of success, but we also, what we know is interesting and what we know is kind of useful as well to our readers is to learn from each other and how have these entrepreneurs actually overcome difficult situations. And then we can kind of work with you and dig into that and find out a bit more about, you know, how that process went and what did you learn from it and where did you get help from and how did you overcome it. I think those are really useful and interesting, and people like to read those stories.
Mm-hmm. Antonella, you mentioned earlier that you were saying that basically the story, or whenever you are in front of an audience, it needs to be a completely new process. At least that was your pitch, right? So you need to, I don't know, maybe recreate your story, relive your story, maybe tell it from another angle. But at the same time, I was thinking, in a sense, you're also, at least it feels to me sometimes that way. Also in written communication, you need to say the same thing over and over again. Of course, if it's a personal story, you can't tell that 100 times. But if you want to transmit your message of how to change the world, it also needs to, you need to nail it into the heads of people, right? But how do you find the balance between creating the story in you and sort of, I don't know, creating an image, creating a brand, creating the one message with which you want to change something?
I've been working in marketing for many years, and words like marketing and image make me feel the chills. I think they are bad things in social entrepreneurs. And maybe they are wonderful for media, I don't know. I don't want to enter that. But I think that to try to project an image, which is something separate from you as a social entrepreneur, as something else that you're trying to create, is a very bad exercise. I think you need to be yourself more than ever. This separation between the private individual, the entrepreneurs, the guy that's speaking in front of an audience, the father, the teacher, all those separations are very bad. What I've learned is that people that speak very well, they speak in the same way when they are in front of an audience, when they are with their spouses, or when they are in private, discussing on the phone with their mothers. Look at Obama. I know that is an obvious example, and it shouldn't be done, but many others. Tony Blair, for example, who I admire. Tony Blair speaks always in the same way, his way. And I love that because it has to do with credibility. It has to do with credibility. Why you should work to project something else, which is separate from yourself? I don't understand. Your strong point is your social enterprise. You're changing the life of so many people. You're addressing the suffering of so many people. What is there to invent? So, but because I've been in advertising so many years, and it gives the allergy to me now, all those ideas. Maybe Anna has a different view, but I work for simplicity. The thing that you do is amazing enough, at least at Ashoka. If you are a social entrepreneur of Ashoka, it means that you're already in the top of the world. One person every 10 millions to be a social entrepreneur of Ashoka. So you don't go very far to find the way to be special. You are. So tell what you're doing in a way that we understand, which they don't do. Anna said this. You need to be understood. I had a teacher that always said that public speaking is like this. You have this paper, you are doing this with the paper, and then your job is to, clarify. No create, clarify. Because the work is there already. If it weren't, it wouldn't be an Ashoka Fellow, I tell you.
Anna, do you have a reaction to that, or do you want to build on it, forget about marketing, just be yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for just being clear and not sort of, not trying to kind of make it more complicated than it needs to be, and speaking to other people like we're all humans, and just think about the stories the story that you really want to share, and the story that you think other people will connect with. And I think that's what will get you the furthest.
Yeah. Alex, please go ahead.
Yeah, maybe one question. I mean, I've also worked with many Ashoka Fellows, and we've seen all kinds of personality types, right? You have very expressive people who can talk for hours, but also introverts, specialists, some people with a more consulting, mindset, So maybe a question first to Antonella. What's your experience with working with different personality types? You know, what does it take to move them, to get them out of their comfort zone?
So this is very interesting, because you normally expect that those that speak very much in their normal life, that those that are or feel very social, are the best speakers, and they are not, because in general they trust very much on the possibility to improvise. Improvisation is such a bad thing. It's a word that I really consider bad thing in public speaking. So people that think that they can speak of everything every time are bad collaborators. Whereas introverts, people that are not so fast at speak, but that can think and prepare and dedicate time because they know that the stage is not their normal place, make very interesting speakers. Of course, this is not the 100% rule, but I tell you, it's like this, you know. Introverts, social entrepreneurs, introverts do very good subjects or speakers, in my view. In general, people that say, oh, he's fantastic, he can speak for hours in the bar, those are not necessarily best speaker. For me, there is only one element that make the good speaker, the difference between the good speaker and the bad speaker, and it is preparation. Full period. It's only about preparation. A good speech is only about preparation. Nobody was born with this talent. Everybody know how to speak since 20,000 years ago, when we were, you know, passing all day hunting and fishing, and then at the end of the day, we had the fire and we had dinner together, and the only way to entertain each other was to stand up and tell a story. Tell a story is something that we have inside of us since the beginning of humanity. What is there to prepare? What is there to, you know, what's the kind of talent? No, it's in us. We tell story because we exist. We tell stories because our mind is wired for stories. So to prepare the good story and spend time to cook the ingredients of the good story is the only element. There's nothing else. Nobody was born to be a speaker. Nobody is negated to be a speaker. Nobody is the opposite to being a good speaker. No, this is why it's so liberating, this activity, because we have it in us. It's just a matter of preparation. For me, there is no other element.
Thanks so much, Antonella.
And what would you think about someone who's a written communicator? Would you say there's worse or better types? How can you tease out? You were saying you were working with the people on their stories. How can you tease those out? And is there some such, as Antonella was saying, it just needs practice, or it just needs the right, you know, partners? It's not one type that is better than another.
For written communication,
yeah.
You mean? Yeah, well, I was going to say, just sort of in response, obviously being able to speak, public speaking is such a useful tool, and it's really worth practicing it. I agree, but I think if that's really not your comfort zone, or even if it is, I think you can also be quite an influential communicator in other ways as well. So some people who are not, I've never seen speak, are on Twitter all the time and are very kind of reactive and are quite influential in that field, or writing blogs or whatever. So there are other formats where you might find your voice and where you might find just a more natural kind of home for yourself. Mm-hmm. What was your question about different styles of
well,
writing?
there's actually in the same way as we think of intrinsic and extrinsic speakers, whether there's some types that you recognize that are easier to work with in whatever that might be in written communication, yeah. Or whether it's always a process between the one who's submitting something to you and you, yeah. Basically, and you can pretty much always make it work.
Yeah, I mean, again, like everything, the more you write, the better you get, and it's just practice. And if you do quite enjoy writing, just do it and start a blog and do it all the time and get feedback. And it's also a really good way of kind of processing your thoughts and developing your thinking, and putting it out there and getting response and comments. I think that can be a really valuable exercise. And in terms of styles, some people, I suppose journalistically, we're often interested in people who are prepared to be quite provocative and to kind of come out with a big, bold statement and say the things that maybe everybody's thinking, but no one dares to say with their name on it. And, you know, if you are that person, then get in touch. Because it's important that, you know, that these things are said and that we're not all just saying exactly the same thing and agreeing with each other. And that's the kind of the whole point of a platform like Pioneers Post, is to kind of be a space where you can have a bit of that debate and back and forth, and people might have completely opposite views, but, you know, we want to kind of allow that debate to happen.
Yeah. Thanks very much. I think I very much like your point about also thinking about a strategy of how you can place yourself, how you can communicate, maybe combining different channels of communication, not trying to do everything, maybe trying to do everything if you can. But I think that's important in terms of also strategically thinking about how you go about this whole thing, in terms of both sort of hedging your whatever the kinds of communication you have, or the kinds of communication you draw from in the game, but also then focusing on how you craft both written communication and personal communication pitches.
Yeah, and I mean, you're already running a social enterprise, so, you know, you're already doing a lot of difficult things and having an exhausting day. So I think don't kind of force yourself to now do something else completely. You know, do what you get a bit of satisfaction out of. Don't kind of try to do everything, I think. Yeah.
Thanks very much, both. As I was saying, at the end of all of our webinars, I think this is the beginning of the conversation, not the end. So everyone, please feel free to use this as a resource, but also maybe get in touch within our MOOC. Thanks a lot, everyone, for participating, and hope to see you soon. Yeah, that's a good one.